Hey friends, Christy and the turkeys here with Little Roots Ranch. And sorry, our rooster sees something in the distance he doesn't like. You're okay, Alfred. Anyways, today's video is about seeds to start in July for the overwintering garden. And I decided, if you'll notice in the back, I have my turkeys. I decided to shoot in the actual chicken turkey enclosure run so that you guys could kind of see them. Come here, babe. Come here. Come here. I know. Come here. So this is one of my turkeys. That's Esther. And I thought that he was going to be a female, and so I named him Esther, and so now he's just male Esther. And then over there we have Lucian. Hi, Lucian. He likes to be very pretty and likes to strut, so he'll just be doing that the entire video. But anyways, I wanted you guys to see the turkeys. I also have our hen. Oh, our rooster is saying hi too. But she's off. I don't know what she's doing. We have an 1/8 acre run for them. And so with different trees, like this is a young, behind me is a young hazelnut tree. And so obviously I have the fence up because they will eat everything. And then I've got quince and apples and plums. And I did have a peach, but they did take off all the bark. So anyways, but today I wanted to talk about seeds to start in July for the overwintering garden. And I said this in the last video, which was the June planting for fall harvest, but a loose rule of thumb is that seeds started in June are for fall harvest, and seeds started in July are for overwintering harvest, or harvest during the winter, or they will, like for instance, cabbage will pop right as the days start getting a little bit longer and it starts warming up even just a tad. And so the real important part when planning fall versus overwintering garden is the stage of the plant going into winter. And so you want a little bit of a smaller plant because they're more resilient when you're doing overwintering. And so a lot of the overwintering stuff will be late July. Weather-wise, we have a pretty, July is our warmest weather, of course, and August is pretty darn warm as well. And so what's important is where the plant is at. Now, I know that that's hard, even for a seasoned gardener, because Mother Nature, you know, none of us know the weather, and the weather really impacts how, you know, you get more light and warmer weather, the plant grows faster. If we run into an overcast, you know, couple weeks, or it starts raining, which would be great, then the plant's gonna grow a lot slower. And so all of those things can change. But the good thing about growing food is that if you're planning to have cabbage to overwinter and it comes in the fall, well, that's still amazing, and vice versa. You know, it's always exciting to watch things grow in our gardens, and of course to eat them. Another thing I wanted to talk about, which is pretty interesting, I remember when I had first learned this concept, but did you know that plants have their own antifreeze, or antifreeze, sorry, their own antifreeze? And they do. But what's really awesome about it is that they use sugar to help protect them from the really cold weather. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I love fall and overwintered carrots. I love carrots year-round, but I especially love fall and overwintered carrots. And that's because they are so sweet. If you haven't noticed it, pay attention. Carrots that you harvest, once we've had like the first frost or when the weather's a lot cooler, they're just gonna be so much sweeter. And that's because the plants, they know the cycles, the yearly cycles, right? And so they can sense when the days are getting shorter sun-wise, and when the evenings and days in general, but the evenings especially, are starting to get cooler, and they know that winter is coming. And if they want to make it through to winter, because a plant's goal is always to produce seed to carry on, you know, the next generation or whatnot. And some crops, we like the seed, say, well, pre-seed, but like broccoli or whatever. And then some plants we want to get it before there's any sign of any seeds. So that would be like carrots, or like radishes are a good one. Radishes get really spicy when they go to seed, and they tend to bolt really fast and stuff like that. And so all of those things are important as far as knowing the plants and knowing how they behave. The other thing to consider is that when looking at your garden, keep in mind where the plant grows best, and then realize that it would not grow during the opposite time. So for instance, let's take tomatoes, right? Everybody knows that it needs to be nice and warm for tomatoes, and everyone's waiting every spring for it to be warm enough to put out our tomatoes. It would obviously make sense that tomatoes are not going to be growing during the winter. You know, if they don't like the spring temperature, they're absolutely not liking the winter temperature. That's a given, right? But some that aren't as easy to identify is like spinach, right? And so spinach is one of the first things we plant in the spring, one of the last things we plant in the fall, and you know, and one of the biggest things for the overwinter, like spinach is really hardy and does really well when it's cold, which would make sense that spinach is absolutely terrible in the summer. It goes to seed right away, it's spicy, the flavor isn't great. And so if you think about when the plant grows its best, then it's obvious that it wouldn't grow as well in the opposite season. And the last thing I'll say on that, and then I'll get to my list. The last thing I'll say is that it also depends on what kind of seed you purchased. And you may not know, and that's fine, or you may not remember. A lot of times as a farmer, I purchase multiple types of a seed, and that includes, like, I think the biggest example of that would be the carrots and let's use cabbage. Both carrots and cabbage, I purchase multiple types of the same seed. And because I have different uses and the seed is developed for different things. So when I'm starting my garden in the early spring, and I'm so excited, and I need to get to market fast because, you know, everyone wants produce the second, before we even had our last frost, which we all know isn't easy. And so I want to get a quick growing cabbage. And so that would be one type of seed, right? Then there's main seed cabbage, and then there's overwintering cabbage. And all of those are different seeds, and they're not interchangeable, or at least not easily. So that quick growing cabbage, the thing is that it is bred to develop really well in very cold temperatures and grow really fast. But the growth is also unsteady. And what I mean by that is that it's hard to manage. Your risk for bolting is going to be a lot higher. The heat tolerance or even warmth tolerance is very low. And so it's kind of harder to grow those seeds. They're best for the early spring, but you know, if I were to seed that for my main season, which would be like summer growing, I'm not going to get anywhere with that. And it generally lacks, with how fast it's growing, it lacks the ability to overwinter. So then of course there's main season cabbage, which is just your regular old cabbage. And then there's overwintering cabbage, which is more hardy in the cold weathers. It doesn't necessarily grow fast. It's not necessarily bred for heat tolerance, but it can go that extra mile. And that's cabbage for an example. Carrots is the other type. They have usually the longer carrots or the overwintering carrots. You'll see them listed as like storage carrots. And then there's like the quick growing, excuse me, like the Mocha, Napoli, whatever, you know, and whereas like Bolero is like goes the distance. And so having different types of seeds are important for different types of things. Now with the cabbage, they don't really grow at different times as well. But with carrots, it's a little bit different. Like I'll have different DTM, which is date to mature, or days to maturity. I always say date, but it's days to maturity. And I'll do my quick growing one to get to consumers as fast as possible. And then I usually grow a purple one, and that just always has a longer DTM. And then there's the storage, and those are ones can overwinter or whatnot. So I can plant all three at the same time, and they'll come up at different times. And then as I progress through the season, it alternates. And I understand that that can be kind of complex, and you know, that was more for, you know, I have a wide audience and different levels of planting in the garden. Ultimately, it's totally okay to just put seeds in and have no idea what's going on, you know, or like when would be the most perfect time for that exact seed and things like that. Because ultimately the gardening should be fun, it should be relaxing, and it should be tasty. And you know, and we all have failures. I always try and make sure and say that in all of my videos. You know, I do not know, hi boys. The turkeys and I do not know a farmer that doesn't have multiple crop losses each year from like a market gardener growing a wide variety of crops. You know, and so if you have crop losses, that's a-okay. It happens. Don't feel bad. It happens to every single one of us. This year, for me, the cucumbers I've never had a problem with cucumbers. My cucumbers this year are doing terrible. Another farmer reached out to me and she had asked how my cucumbers were doing. And I said, you know, they're doing terrible. I don't understand. I did everything perfect like I always do, you know, and they're mad or something. And she said the same exact thing, you know, and we get our seeds from different places. So I don't know, maybe it was the weather or I don't know what, but it happens. Yeah, I've never had a problem growing cucumbers in my life. But anyways, let's get to our list. So this is July planted seeds for the overwintering garden. And some stuff might come up earlier, or, you know, like spinach, for instance, if you plant at the very end of July, and it depends on if you're harvesting baby leaves for a salad, you will have that in the fall. But if you're waiting to get those larger bushels and pick off of during the winter, then that would be overwintering, right? Let me grab my list because I'll obviously forget. Okay. Also, my turkeys have been so quiet. Maybe I need to film more videos inside of their run. Maybe they just like being with mama, huh? You like being with mama? Oh, good boys. Okay, so the July list is split into two sections, and that's mid-July and late July. And there isn't an early July. One, have fun and celebrate 4th of July, but also it's just so darn hot. And we've had these heat waves that come in July, and it just makes it a lot harder, and it's just safer to just wait a little bit. You know, we're right in the middle of the heat, you know, starting off our month and a half or 2 months or whatever of pretty darn warm weather. Last year was crazy. I remember in October we had an 80-degree, hi rooster, we had an 80-degree day, and so that was crazy. Anyways, okay, so this is the mid-July list. Okay, so it's broccoli, Savoy, thank you boys. I'm gonna start again. Broccoli, Savoy cabbage, chicory, endive, kale, Swiss chard, kohlrabi, green onions, and rutabagas. And those things are pretty hardy, and they can take being started in the warm weather. Obviously, watering is very essential. And then late July, we have beans, which that you're coming up on the last time that you can plant beans for the year. Peas, which I'll come back to that, because the weather changes every year, right? And so peas can be a little bit risky depending, but fall peas, remember that antifreeze sugar thing? Fall peas are deliciously sweet. Beets, cabbage, Napa or Chinese cabbage, cauliflower, turnips, collard greens, Asian greens, and spinach. And so Asian greens, spinach, and peas all fall into the monitor. You know, if we're about to start a heat wave, I would just wait till it's done to get those started, just because you'll have more of a chance of success. But if it's a little bit of cooler weather, then it might, thank you boys, it might be easier to just go ahead and get them out and, you know, keep an eye on them and stuff like that. And every year it truly is different, you know, it's just kind of general guidelines. And, you know, I always encourage everybody to experiment and, you know, see what's going on or what can happen. And, you know, you never know, and the weather's always changing. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Shoot, what was it? Oh, I wanted to say that one of the things that I've learned in gardening that is so crazy is how much of a difference planting something 2 weeks apart or even a month can really make a difference. And that applies even more as you go into the shoulder seasons, and especially like in the spring, where like if you plant a cabbage, you know, in the field, and then 2-3 weeks later you plant another cabbage, a lot of times they come up at the same exact time, which is why, you know, like the plants generally try and wait for when they're going to be available, or sometimes the first planted cabbage will actually be later than the second cabbage because the second cabbage was planted in more ideal circumstances, and things are always changing. So I guess all of that to say that, you know, every year will be different, and definitely have fun, you know, have fun in your garden and have it be peaceful and relaxing and all that stuff. But anyways, with that, the rooster and the turkeys and I all bid you adieu. Thank you for watching. I can't believe it's already July, and I can't wait to hear updates on either your fall garden or your thank you boys, or your overwintering garden. Thank you for watching. Bye.